pleasure to meet with colleagues on the Iranian Freedom Committee to discuss a very important issue that it is safe to say will remain at the top of the international political agenda for years to come. I'm talking, of course, about Iran and the threats posed by a ruling medieval theocracy which has little place in the modern world and would be just a side street were it not for the fact that its human rights record is simply unacceptable, and equally for the fact that it is a nation striving to become a nuclear power. And those two facts are alone are enough to make this cause the cause for all of us. For nuclear weapons creates a global situation which impacts upon every citizen alive in this world today and on those citizens who will follow us in the years to come. And I want to make it absolutely clear that when we as parliamentarians in the UK Parliament come to these meetings, we don't only come because we believe in a vital cause, the freedom and democracy of the Iranian people. We come because we believe that cause is our cause, that cause impacts upon our children and our grandchildren. And we are in this matter together. Few can disagree that the Iranian regime is a promoter of terrorism and violence. And consequently, this conference is very timely indeed and allows us to discuss the prospect of change in Iran, a change that many amongst the Iranian people yearn for, and many, as I say, beyond the boundaries of that burdened country yearn for too. The West have, for more than a decade, in fact for almost 2 decades, tried to engage with the Iranian regime on the nuclear issue and its enrichment program through a policy of negotiations. The core assumption among Western leaders and their policy advisers has always been that the theocracy in Iran can be encouraged to change, that we can talk to them as though we're talking to parish priests in little villages in rural England over a cup of tea and cucumber sandwiches, and of course they'll be reasonable and they will listen to us. Have no doubt, they have no intention of listening to negotiation after negotiation. Their only objective is the continuation of their own evil regime. And at every step along the way, the only outcome they seek is a strengthening of the continuation of that regime. These are not gentle, rural village vicars. These are vicious, fanatical, terrorist-supporting, medieval theocratists whose only wish is to control not only the actions of their people, but the thoughts of their people. And we in this place, who believe in freedom, and who believe in democracy, and who believe that every man and woman's voice is deserving of respect, should therefore rally around our cause, for I repeat, it is their cause. Let us remember when I say that we think we can change the thinking of the mullahs in Iraq, that approach has consistently been proved to be flawed. It's its only purpose, and it creates an instability by the very fact that it is manufactured, an instability in the Middle East, in a region which is more unstable now than it's been for 35 years, creates an instability that adds to the threat of all of us living on this planet. One of the worst outcomes during this time, this period of dialogue, was the decision by the US, followed by the UK and the EU, as an act of gift, to label the regime's main opposition movement, the People's Mujahideen Organization of Iran, as a proscribed terrorist organization. A prescription in place as a way of tempting the mullahs to think that we understand their position and we would get something in return. We failed. The West hoped for a more positive response from the Iranian regime, an expectation that is still unfulfilled. 15 years after they mooted that view that we should proscribe the organisation which is fighting on all of our behalves. And indeed, they use this unjust labelling to tighten its grip on power inside the country, countering every criticism with the fact that the victims they were imposing their evil regime upon were the supporters of a terrorist organisation. That was our doing. That's because we so prescribed the PMOI as a terrorist organisation, listing them as an unacceptable body operating in the Western world. That was our fault. We gave them that, thinking we could get something back, and I repeat, we got nothing. They also used the same argument to suppress the members of the organisation in Camp Ashraf, who has suffered immensely at the hands of the Iranian regime's proxy government and their leader al-Maliki in Iraq, attacking them brutally, murdering, violating systematically their most fundamental rights. Fortunately, the Iranian resistance turned the momentum to their and the Iranian people's advantage through an unprecedented legal and political campaign spearheaded by President-elect Mrs. Maryam Rajavi, which led to the deprescription of the PMOI in the UK, the EU, and lastly, recently, in Washington. A number of people here fought long and hard for that, and I was very proud. In fact, one of the proudest things I think I've ever done, to be one of those 35 appellants who fought and won that case right through to the final court of appeal in our own country. Even when the judge of the court said that the decision to prescribe the PMOI was perverse, an incredible legal word to use, even then, our government decided to appeal against that finding, to their shame and utter disgrace. And we fought that, and thankfully we won. But it was our victory. All of us were involved in that victory. That campaign was successful because it pursued a just cause. It challenged a flawed policy, but most importantly because of the steadfastness of Ashraf residents who became the beacon for the whole world to see, who were persecuted in a way that actually was turned to the benefit of free-thinking people everywhere. And we should be very proud to be associated with those brave people who had the courage and the steadfastness to remain in that situation. I would have run away years ago. But they had the courage to stay there, to stand up, and to say, this is our place, because this is what we created, and this is where our freedoms stand. And I send my utmost respect and congratulations to those brave residents of Camp Ashraf, who many of you now in Camp Liberty. The truth of the matter is the Iranian regime, to my mind, sense that the world is changing, and that it is why it has now increased the domestic repression and accelerated dramatically the number of executions in Iran. That fear has also forced the Iranian regime to do its utmost through its Iraqi proxies to prevent a peaceful solution to the Camp Ashraf and Camp Liberty crisis. Today, we are honoured to have Mr. Boumedra, a man of the utmost courage, who gave up his livelihood because of what he saw working in the organisation which was supposed to be arranging the just transaction of the peoples of Ashraf to Camp Liberty and ensuring that their rights were properly looked after in that camp. He was the man that stood up, another beacon. A man who gave up his livelihood, risked his whole future to say this is not right. And I am, I repeat, privileged to be associated with such a man, because he's a role model for every member of both the House of Commons and the House of Lords. And it's a delight to see you here, sir. The recent dispute in regard to the issue of Ashraf residents being allowed to sell their properties, to refinance their resettlement from Iraq to third countries, is a shame on all of us involved in this whole process. And unfortunately, Mr. Kobler is again acting in a manner not expected of an impartial mediator. In fact, Kobler's actions are opening the way for the government of Iraq to plunder the residents' wealth, steal millions of dollars worth of property from the residents under the direct supervision of the UN. And I say to the UN, shame on you. That's not why we, free nations of the world, set up an international policing organisation to act in support of tyrants and to allow those tyrants to steal the well-being of people who had little. That's not the role of the United Nations, and Mr. Kobler should get a message from this place, from this seat of democracy, that his actions have smeared the very name itself of the United Nations and lessened in the minds of people the hope that the United Nations created all those years ago when it was formed. Meanwhile, I repeat, I think the momentum is tilting in favour of the Iranian resistance and ultimately the Iranian people. The regime in Tehran is facing several acute problems on different fronts regarding its nuclear programme, and the weakening of its closest strategic ally in the region, the regime of Bashar al-Assad in Syria, has caused it serious problems. This means that the prospect of change in Iran in 2013 are a little brighter. But I think that Western governments need to grasp the moment to ensure that we are able to react positively to an ever-quickening and changing situation in that most dangerous of regions. It is quite clear that the policy of carrot and stick has failed, and the harshest sanctions regime, although effective, is not sufficient to curb the Iranian regime's nuclear programme and make the regime change and its behaviour in this respect happen. I support Maryam Rajavi. I support the option for the third way. I believe it is the only way. Supporting the Iranian people themselves, to throw off the shackles themselves, and in so doing, supporting organisations like the PMOI, but especially the National Council for Resistance in Iran, to help them achieve that outcome. That is our role. That's what we can do for Mrs. Maryam Rajavi and the movement. We can ensure that our government recognises the need to support a genuinely peaceful organisation which believes in the third option, which believes in internal change in Iran, which believes in a free, secular and democratic Iran. And I hope that we can have a party in Tehran. That is my great ambition. Let me now finish by repeating the point I made right at the start. This is not only the fight of the Iranian people. This is not only the fight of the National Council for Resistance in Iran. This is our fight for a more peaceful world. That's the fight we are involved in. And I pray, I beg, I plead with you to recognise the importance of that particular fact, that we are fighting for a free, democratic, secular Iran because it impacts upon our freedom. And I believe that is the greatest fight worth taking up in this whole wide world.